Hello, curious listeners. Welcome back. Today, we're diving straight into the stack, starting right in the editorial section of today's newspaper. First up, we've got a piece titled, "The Right to Remember, Preserving Repair Knowledge in a Digital Age." It's by Kanari Guttari, a researcher in human-computer interaction. And she argues that India's right to repair policies, which are evolving, need to go further. They need a right to remember.
Yeah, it's a really interesting angle. What she highlights is this huge sort of invisible, informal repair economy in India. You know, we talk a lot about big digital projects, AI policy,
Right.
but these systems that just quietly keep everyday life going, like the local phone fixer, the person who knows how to get your old mixer working again. They often get missed in policy discussions.
Exactly. And she talks about that tacit knowledge they have. It's not written down. It's like muscle memory, years of just watching and doing, figuring things out. She mentions the repairers in Delhi's Carol Bagh or Chennai's Ritchie Street. Apparently one repairer said, if we don't fix it, who will? They're not using manuals. They're using their senses, intuition, adapting parts. So what's the risk here? Is this knowledge disappearing?
Well, that's the core question, isn't it? This kind of knowledge usually passed down mentor to apprentice. It is starting to erode. Why? Well, product designs are getting less repairable. That 2023 iFixit report she cites is pretty stark. Only 23% of smartphones in Asia are easily fixable.
Wow, only 23%.
Yeah, and consumer habits are shifting too, more towards just replacing things. So these informal repairers get locked out. And the article points out India is the world's third largest e-waste producer, right? But the main policy, the e-waste rules from 2022, barely mentions repair as a way to prevent waste. It's mostly focused on recycling after the fact.
Okay, but then it gets really interesting. The article suggests this concept of unmaking, taking things apart, repurposing them, treating breakdowns not as failures, but as like feedback, learning opportunities.
Exactly. A broken circuit board isn't just trash. It could be a teaching tool. A salvaged part could get someone back online for work or school. And then here's the twist. She brings in AI.
AI. How does AI help preserve this very hands-on human knowledge?
It seems counterintuitive, but the idea is to connect India's big AI ambitions with this grassroots repair culture. Modern gadgets are sealed up, hard to get into. AI could help bridge that. Imagine using decision trees to map out common repair steps.
Okay.
Or using large language models to actually capture those stories, those narratives from repairers, and translate them into something structured, something shareable. You'd capture the how without losing the why or the local ingenuity.
So it's really about valuing that quiet, embodied labor that keeps our digital lives running, even when it's hard to digitize directly. It reminds me of that philosopher, Michael Polanyi.
We know more than we can tell.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, this is about seeing the hidden ingenuity all around us and how policy and maybe even AI could support it instead of letting it just fade away. It's a neat paradox. Old knowledge plus new tech for sustainability. Okay, moving from that local ingenuity to the bigger stage of international policy. Our next deep dive is another editorial. India's Trade Pact Blunder, Weakening Public Health Access by Biswajit Dar. This one takes a critical look at the India-UK trade deal, the CETA, specifically its potential impact on access to medicines.
Yeah, this piece raises some serious concerns. The core issue is Article 13.6 in this India-UK agreement. It basically says that the preferred way to ensure access to medicines is through voluntary mechanisms, like voluntary licensing.
Okay, and why is that a big deal? What was the approach before?
Well, India has historically been a really strong champion of compulsory licensing. That's where the government can allow someone else to produce a patented product without the patent holder's consent under certain conditions, like a public health need or unaffordable pricing. This new CETA provision, it really shifts India away from that long-held position.
And the article gives a really stark example of compulsory licensing in action, right? The cancer drug.
Sorafenib tusiligly, yeah. In 2012, Natco Pharma got a compulsory license. The price for a month's treatment dropped from over 2,80,000 rupees down to less than 8,800.
Wow. That's life-changing.
Yeah.
So moving towards voluntary licensing as the preferred route, what does that mean practically for affordability?
It raises big questions. India's own Patents Act specifically allows compulsory licenses if public needs aren't met or prices are too high or the invention isn't being worked in India. Those are key safeguards. The CETA provision seems to, well, undermine that stance. And there's another point. The requirement for patent holders to report annually on whether their invention is actually being used or worked in India, that's been diluted. Now it's only required every 3 years or so. That makes it harder to justify a compulsory license based on non-working.
Okay.
And organizations like Doctors Without Borders have pointed out that voluntary licenses, which the patent holder controls, often come with strings attached. They might limit supply or territories or keep prices higher than a compulsory license would allow. We saw some of that with remdesivir during the pandemic, even with voluntary licenses.
So this isn't just about medicines then. The article also connects it to technology transfer, which sounds broader.
Absolutely. If you look at the bigger picture, this preference for voluntary mechanisms impacts India's long-standing demand for technology transfer on favorable terms for developing countries. That demand goes way back to the 70s, the idea of a new international economic order. It was about helping countries industrialize. But it also applies crucially now to climate-friendly technologies. The latest UN climate change report specifically flagged intellectual property rights as a barrier to getting those green technologies deployed quickly where they're needed.
I see. So by agreeing to this CETA language favoring voluntary approaches, India might be weakening its own arguments in global forums when it asks for access to critical tech, whether for industry or for tackling climate change.
That seems to be the author's concern. So for you listening, the takeaway is how these seemingly abstract trade deals can have really concrete effects on medicine prices, yes, but also on a nation's ability to access technology for development and environmental goals. It connects your health, your wallet, and the planet.
Okay, let's shift gears now. From those complex trade rules to a massive engineering project with a really powerful message. We're diving into an opinion piece now titled Kashmir Rail, A Bridge of Belonging. This is by Sarabjit Arjun Singh, a former general manager of Indian Railways, and it's celebrating the completion of the Udhampur-Srinagar-Baramulla rail link. A project almost 40 years in the making. It's 272 kilometers through the Pir Panjal and Himalayan ranges. He doesn't just call it steel and concrete, though. He calls it a bridge of belonging.
Yeah, the piece really emphasizes that this isn't just about physical connection, it's about bridging psychological gaps, too. Mobility means opportunity. Suddenly, markets are closer for farmers, education is more accessible for students, jobs become possible for people in places like Sopore and Kazigun. It shrinks distance, physically and emotionally.
It's framed as a story of national integration, not just symbolic, but really practical. Shared development, investment, and he really praises the engineers. Their sheer grit. Working through harsh winters, landslides, security threats, he puts them in the same league as the engineers who built the really tough Borgat line near Mumbai back in the day, or the Assam link right after independence. These are the nation builders, in a way.
And thinking about the bigger picture, the strategic aspect is huge, too. It lessens the dependence on that single, often blocked Srinagar-Jammu highway.
Right, the highway that gets cut off by snow or landslides.
Exactly. So this ensures a more reliable flow of essential supplies, food, fuel, medicine. That's a massive logistical plus. And the fact that they push through, despite all the geotechnical challenges, the climate, the political uncertainty over decades, it's a real testament to perseverance.
And beyond the economics and strategy, he touches on the cultural side. A railway line becomes a channel for exchange, doesn't it? Trains carry people, stories, ideas.
A kind of slow social equalizer.
For people in the valley maybe who haven't traveled much, it's a window to the rest of India, vice versa. So what does he see as the next steps? What's needed to make the most of this massive investment?
Well, that raises the important question of building around this new backbone. The article stresses the need for really careful planning. Things like last-mile connectivity, getting people to and from the stations, developing the station areas themselves, supporting local businesses, artisans, women's groups to actually benefit from the new traffic and opportunities.
So it's not just about the track itself.
No, it's about creating an ecosystem around it, making these stations hubs of activity and growth, not just stocks on a map. So for you, the listener, this story shows how infrastructure can be more than just functional. It can be a promise, connecting lives, weaving places together, turning lines on a map into meaningful connections, and hopefully building trust for the future.
Staying with economic ideas for a moment, our next piece explains something we hear referenced all the time in global news. How does Laurel Bank classify countries by income? This is by Bertha Rowan Cole and Pablo Arriagada, and it breaks down those income groups we often hear about.
Yeah, it's a good question to start with. When we say rich or poor countries, what do we actually mean? The World Bank has this system to make it clearer. They group countries into four categories: low income, lower middle, upper middle, and high income. And it's based primarily on one number: gross national income, or GNI, per capita.
Okay, let's unpack GNI per capita. It sounds a bit technical, but it's basically the average income of everyone living in a country, right? Including income they might earn from abroad.
That's essentially it. The World Bank takes that GNI figure, converts it to US dollars using a specific method to smooth out exchange rate fluctuations, and then compares it to fixed thresholds. For this year, for example, low income is $11,135 or less per person. High income is over $13,935.
And crucially, it's an absolute measure, isn't it? Not relative. A country is classified based on its own GNI per capita against these specific dollar amounts.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how it compares to its neighbors, just where it falls against these thresholds. And what's quite interesting is where these thresholds originally came from. They were set back in the late 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they were initially linked to the World Bank's own lending policies. Specifically, the line between low income and middle income was the threshold for getting the most concessional loans, the really soft loans from IED, the International Development Association.
Ah, okay. So it had a practical purpose back then.
It did. Now, it's not directly tied to lending eligibility anymore, but they still update the thresholds every year for inflation using a global inflation measure.
And because economies grow or sometimes shrink and the thresholds change, countries can actually move between these groups over time.
Right. The good news is most countries have moved up the ladder over the long term, but it's not guaranteed. The article mentions Syria and Yemen, for instance, which actually moved down from lower middle to low income back in 2017 because of conflict and economic collapse.
So looking at the big picture, how has this classification system changed how we see global poverty and wealth distribution?
Well, it paints a dramatic picture of progress, actually. The article points out that back in 2004, about 37% of the world's population lived in countries classified as low income.
Wow, over a third.
Yeah. Today, that share is less than 10%. And conversely, the share of people in upper middle income countries, it jumped from under 10% to about 35% in that same time frame.
That's a huge shift.
It really is. So for you, the listener, understanding these classifications gives you a much clearer, more objective way to think about global development. When you hear terms like developing or developed or rich and poor, these World Bank categories provide a concrete, measurable basis for those descriptions.
Okay, let's pivot now to space and science. Our next deep dive explores a really exciting new tool orbiting Earth, the NISAR satellite. This comes from an interview with Karen St. Germain, who directs NASA's Earth Science Division. Her quote sums it up: "Anything that moves, NISAR will see with unprecedented fidelity."
So NISAR stands for NASA Aerosynthetic Aperture Radar Satellite, a joint mission 11 years in the making, finally launched July 31st. What makes it so special? What's the big deal compared to other satellites watching Earth? Well, what's really fascinating here and unique is that it's the first satellite using two different radar frequencies, L-band and S-band, to constantly monitor Earth's surface. This dual frequency approach is key.
How so? What does that let it do?
It means NISAR can detect tiny changes in position, we're talking less than a centimeter of anything, with structure on the ground, over an area roughly half the size of a tennis court. The L-band radar can penetrate vegetation, see changes in soil moisture, even detect subtle ground movements. The S-band gives really high-resolution surface detail. And because it's radar, it sees through clouds day and night. It's a completely new level of observation capability.
Less than a centimeter. That's incredible. Anything that moves. Can you give some examples? What kind of movements are we talking about?
Think about the subtle bulging of the ground before a volcano erupts. NISAR can see that. Or land starting to shift before a major landslide.
Wow, early warning potential.
Huge potential. It can spot tiny shifts in buildings after an earthquake, helping assess damage. It can even measure how much dry vegetation, potential wildfire fuel, is out there in wildlands. These are things we just couldn't measure systematically from space before. It gives us unprecedented fidelity, just like she said.
It sounds amazing, but 11 years. That suggests it wasn't exactly easy. Were there major hurdles in building this thing?
Oh, absolutely. A mission this complex, especially a joint one between NASA and ISRO, is bound to face challenges. Beyond the sheer engineering scale, the interview mentions the COVID-19 pandemic hitting right when they were starting integration.
Ah, that must have been tough.
Extremely tough. Teams were separated globally, travel was restricted, new protocols had to be invented on the fly. And then, more recently, they hit a big technical snag with the huge 40-foot deployable reflector antenna. During testing in India, they found a risk that parts of it, the struts, could overheat in space before it fully deployed, potentially damaging it. So they had to very carefully take it apart again, bring a piece back, apply a special reflective coating, and then put it all back together. A massive, complex fix done under pressure.
Incredible. So beyond the science, what does this mean for us? Are there commercial applications? Who's interested in this data?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, there's already huge commercial interest in Earth observation data. Saint Germain mentioned that about 3/4 of Fortune 100 companies use NASA's existing archive.
Really?
Yeah, and most users are commercial. NISAR's data will directly feed into sectors like agriculture, think monitoring crop health, or soil moisture risk assessment for insurance and finance, infrastructure monitoring, wildfire management. The list goes on. It'll even help scientists understand processes beneath Earth's crust, which informs models for planets like Mars. So for you, NISAR means a whole new stream of insights about our planet, helping predict hazards, manage resources, and just understand Earth and other worlds better.
From the vastness of space down to the microscopic level now. Our next piece is from the science section. AI-designed proteins boost immunity and T-cell production. This sounds seriously futuristic. So Harvard scientists used AI, specifically AI-designed proteins, to generate large numbers of immune cells and enhance immunity against things like cancer and viruses. How does that even work?
What's really fascinating here is how they did it. They essentially engineered a synthetic key to turn on a crucial cellular pathway called Notch signaling. Think of Notch as a master switch inside cells that tells them what to become, how to differentiate. It's absolutely vital for turning precursor immune cells into T cells, the specific soldiers your immune system needs more of to fight infections or cancer effectively. They found a way to flip that switch artificially.
So why couldn't we just flip this Notch switch before? If it's so important for making T cells, what was the bottleneck?
That's a really important question. Previous methods to activate Notch signaling worked okay in a lab dish, by sticking the activating molecules onto a surface, but you couldn't use that approach inside a living body for therapy. It just wasn't feasible.
Right, you can't coat the inside of someone with activating molecules.
Exactly. The breakthrough came from using these powerful AI-driven protein design tools. These are the kinds of tools developed by people like David Baker, Demis Hassabis, John Jumper work that contributed to a Nobel Prize. These AI tools allowed the Harvard team to design, from scratch, a whole library of soluble Notch activators, proteins that could float around and work inside the body. That was the game changer.
And the results sound pretty impressive. What did they actually achieve?
Yeah, the results look very promising. First, they showed they could use these AI proteins to generate T cells on a large scale in a bioreactor. That's a big deal for things like CAR T-cell therapy for cancer, where you need lots of engineered T cells. Demand for that is growing fast.
Yeah.
But perhaps even more significantly, when they injected these AI-designed proteins into mice during vaccination, the mice showed much stronger T-cell responses. And critically, they produced more memory T cells. Those are the ones that give you long-lasting immunity, the real goal of vaccination.
Wow. So memory T cells too. What does this all mean for future medicine? What are the big possibilities here?
Well, connecting it to the bigger picture, the lead scientist, Rubel Mout, put it plainly. Being able to reliably activate Notch signaling opens up huge opportunities. We're talking potential revolutions in immunotherapy, making cancer treatments more effective, developing much better vaccines, maybe even regenerating immune cells for people with weakened immune systems. So for you, the listener, this shows AI isn't just about data. It's literally designing biological tools now. Tools that could fundamentally change how we fight disease and boost our own natural defenses.
All right, let's shift now to a significant legal development. From the text section, our next deep dive asks, why were the Malegaon blast accused freed? This explains the recent acquittals in that very high-profile 2008 bomb blast case. So, end of July, a special NIA court acquitted all 7 accused in the 2008 Malegaon blast. That includes BJP leader Pragya Singh Thakur and Army Lieutenant Colonel Prasad Purohit. 6 people died in that blast, 95 were injured. It happened during Ramzan. After all this time, why were they acquitted?
Okay, let's unpack this carefully. The fundamental reason, according to the special judge, A.K. Lahoti, was the prosecution's failure. They just didn't produce credible, admissible evidence to prove the accused were actually involved. The judge acknowledged the blast happened, tragically, but said the link to these specific individuals wasn't established beyond reasonable doubt.
And the judgment pointed to specific problems with the evidence in the investigation, didn't it? Can you give some examples?
Yes, several. For instance, regarding Mrs. Thakur, The court found no proof she was in conscious possession of the motorcycle used in the blast. There were no eyewitnesses saying she handed it over, no proof she assembled the bomb. And critically, the forensic expert who examined the bike, he admitted under cross-examination that his conclusion about where the bomb was placed was basically guesswork.
Guesswork, not scientific analysis.
Not according to his own admission in court. He hadn't done the specific tests needed to be certain. That really weakened that piece of evidence.
Okay. And what about Colonel Purohit? He's a serving Army officer. What did the court say about the evidence against him?
Similar issues. The prosecution claimed he'd procured the RDX explosive used in the blast while posted in Kashmir, but the court found no credible evidence tracing the RDX back to him or showing how it was transported. The judge did note Purohit was a trustee of this Abhinav Bharat Trust, which was linked to the conspiracy, but found no proof his army superiors had authorized him to join it, or to use its funds as part of some official duty, which is part of his defense. Again, the evidentiary chain was broken.
So it sounds like a pattern of insufficient evidence and procedural issues. What was the single biggest legal factor leading to the acquittals?
Well, if we connect it to the broader legal process, a crucial turning point was the handling of confessional statements. Initially, the investigation, led by the Maharashtra ATS, relied heavily on confessions recorded under MCOCA, the Maharashtra Control of Organized Crime Act.
Right.
But MCOCA was dropped from the case back in 2016 after the NIA took over and found procedural flaws in how it was applied. The special court agreed, stating the initial sanction to invoke MCOCA lacked proper application of judicial mind. Once MCOCA was out, those confessions became inadmissible as primary evidence under regular criminal law.
So the main pillar of the initial case crumbled.
Effectively, yes. And without MCOCA, you also lose certain legal presumptions, like the reverse burden of proof, which can make conviction easier under anti-terror laws. So for you, the listener, this case really underscores how vital meticulous investigation and strict adherence to legal procedures are, even in very serious, high-profile cases. If the evidence isn't collected properly, if procedures aren't followed correctly, the case can fall apart, leading to acquittals. It highlights the importance of due process.
Okay, from that critical court ruling, let's move back to infrastructure and ambition. Our next deep dive asks, how will railway to Sarang help in regional connectivity? This looks at India's new railway line in Mizoram and connects it to the bigger Act East policy. So Indian Railways recently opened this new 51-kilometer track to Sarang, which is really close to Aizawl, Mizoram's capital, as part of this larger goal to connect all the northeastern state capitals by rail. It started way back in 2008-09, but the article makes clear it was a really tough build.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating here is just the sheer engineering challenge they overcame. Progress was painfully slow for years. They faced terrible weather, really difficult, landslide-prone terrain, shortages of workers, huge problems just getting construction materials into such remote areas. The cost ballooned to over 5,000 crore rupees. And tragically, 18 workers lost their lives when a bridge collapsed last year.
That's a terrible cost.
It really is. Yeah. But they persisted. The line includes 48 tunnels, nearly 13 kilometers underground, and 142 bridges. It's an incredible feat of engineering and sheer will.
So what does this mean for Mizoram itself? Being a landlocked state, how does this railway change things on the ground?
Well, this raises that crucial question of accessibility. For Mizoram, it's a game changer. It's going to drastically cut travel time and cost compared to road or air. That opens up huge potential for tourism, for trade, for moving goods more easily and cheaply. But the significance goes beyond Mizoram. It's a key piece of India's Act East policy.
Okay, let's unpack that. What exactly is the Act East policy, and how does a railway in Mizoram fit into it?
So the Act East policy, launched by PM Modi in 2014, is basically a supercharged version of the earlier Look East policy. The goal is to transform India's northeast from a peripheral region into a gateway, a land bridge connecting India to the Asian countries, Southeast Asia.
Right.
It involves deepening diplomatic ties, boosting economic links, strengthening security cooperation, and improved connectivity roads, rail, even waterways and air links is absolutely fundamental to making that happen. The government has poured money into infrastructure in the Northeast to support this vision. This Mizoram line is seen as vital, potentially linking up with routes through Myanmar eventually.
Okay, so the ambition is there, the investment is there. But what about the reality of connecting beyond India's borders? Is that part happening?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, that's where the challenges really bite. The article points out that while projects within the Northeast, like this railway, are moving forward, the cross-border connectivity parts have largely stalled,
Why is that?
primarily due to instability in India's neighborhood. The civil war in Myanmar since the 2021 coup has massively disrupted projects like the Caledon multimodal project, which relied on routes through Myanmar. Political changes in Bangladesh have also slowed down some links, like the Agartala-Akara railway.
I see. So local progress, but regional headwinds.
Exactly. So for you, the listener, this story shows this interesting dynamic. How vital infrastructure can be transformative locally, bringing huge benefits to a place like Mizoram, but its larger strategic goals, the grand vision of regional integration, can be really hampered by complex geopolitics and instability just across the border.
Finally tonight, let's shift to the fast-moving world of finance and technology. Our last deep dive is from the text section. Why is Hong Kong regulating and licensing stablecoins? This explains a new ordinance coming into force there and what it means for crypto. So Hong Kong's getting serious about stablecoins. From August 1st, they're enforcing this new stablecoins ordinance. Basically, it'll be illegal to offer any unlicensed stablecoin pegged to a fiat currency, like the US dollar, to retail investors. First off, what are stablecoins exactly? And why the sudden regulatory clampdown?
Okay, let's break it down. Stablecoins are a type of cryptocurrency, but unlike Bitcoin or Ether, they're designed to have a stable price. Usually they achieve this by being pegged or linked to a real-world asset, most often a major fiat currency like the dollar or euro, but sometimes gold or even algorithms. The whole point is stability.
Okay, stable sounds good. So why regulate them so strictly if they're meant to be stable? What's the problem?
Well, that raises the crucial question, doesn't it? If they're stable, what's the risk? They actually play a massive role in the crypto world, making trading easier, acting as a bridge between traditional finance and crypto. And interestingly, they're also used quite a bit in countries with high inflation, like Argentina or Turkey, as a way to hold value or send money.
Right.
But with over $250 billion worth of them floating around globally, regulators are worried. The core issue is trust. How do you know that every digital dollar stablecoin out there is actually backed by a real dollar held in reserve by the issuer? Right now, it's often opaque.
And we've seen examples where they weren't stable at all,
Right.
which probably spooked the regulators.
Exactly. Despite the name, they can lose their peg. The article mentions Tether, USDT, the biggest one, dipping below its dollar peg sometimes. But the real earthquake was the collapse of Terra's algorithmic stablecoin, UST, and its sister coin, LUNA, back in May 2022.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. That was huge.
Billions wiped out almost overnight. It caused a massive liquidity crisis across the whole crypto sector. That event really underscored the systemic risks if stablecoins aren't properly backed or designed, and if there's no transparency or oversight.
So how will Hong Kong's new rules tackle this? What will licensed issuers have to do?
If we connect this to the global regulatory trend, Hong Kong's rules are pretty comprehensive. Issuers will need a specific license from the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. They'll have to meet strict requirements about how they manage their reserve assets, ensuring they're sufficient and liquid. There are rules around stabilization mechanisms, capital buffers, and crucially, strong compliance with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing laws, plus mandatory public disclosures and independent audits.
So bringing them into the formal financial fold, essentially.
Pretty much. And Hong Kong isn't alone. The U.S. is working on similar legislation. Japan has rules, Singapore too. The direction globally is towards requiring robust backing, transparency, and regulatory oversight. So for you, the listener, this shows how even innovative financial tech like stablecoins, useful as they might be, eventually needs clear rules of the road to protect users and prevent shocks to the wider financial system.
Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.